What's up, plant family? Devin is here, and I have a pretty fun video I think that you're going to enjoy today. It's all about containers. For me, creating a houseplant scheme, a houseplant garden, containers is a very important part of the puzzle. You can definitely increase the beauty of your houseplants by choosing the right container. You can also sort of diminish the beauty of your houseplants by choosing the wrong container. But there's also pros and cons to every different sort of pot. So I wanted to make a video going through all of the different kinds of containers that I like to use with all of my 80 or 90, however many plants I have these days. All the different containers I use and why I use them and the pros and cons of each of these different kinds of containers. But before I get started, a couple announcements. Number one, I just got married. Check it out. Samantha, my wife is behind filming with a big old smile. Hopefully she has a smile for the next 20 or so minutes as we record this video. That's news number one. News number two, I'm gonna leave a link in the description. I'm starting to do some video chats. If you are looking for some plant consultation, look at the link down below. You have to download an app, which is kind of annoying, but I guess we all do that these days. Download the app and then you can find me on there. And if you want to schedule a video consultation for 30 minutes, I'd be more than happy to help any plant questions that you might have. All right, so let's get into it. The first type of container, and if I had to choose just one type of container for all the plants for the rest of my life, that would be good old faithful Mr. Terracotta, Mr. and Mrs. Terracotta. So the Terracotta, it's the classic unglazed ceramic containers, which the standard sizes of our terracottas are, they have the same depth as they do width. So this is a 6-inch container that I am growing my alocasia inside of. And the terracotta, a couple important things to note. They have a very neutral look, which makes them really accessible for tons of different kinds of plants. But as your plants actually grow, they take on really cool, unique natural aging looks, which I think is one of my favorite aspects of the terracotta. It makes it feel like this plant has been growing since the Italian Renaissance on the steps of Villa Formaggio, Quattro Formaggio, no, of some villa, and now you have it in your home in Pennsylvania in 2022. So I love the look of the old natural look. The other great thing about terracotta is that they are porous. So when you water your plants, you will have evaporation that occurs from the top, but you will also have evaporation coming out of the sides, which is a great thing for many plants. It can be a little bit more challenging for plants that need to have a lot of kind of moisture retention, but for plants like jades or Christmas cactus, terracotta is my go-to for succulents and cacti because it provides a really great drainage environment. And typically, terracotta are generally going to come with drainage holes, which are not required, but it allows for better optionality for the types of plants that you can grow if your container has drainage holes. However, not all have drainage holes. I have these snake plants growing. I don't think there's no drainage hole in there. But typically, your terracotta are gonna come with drainage holes. So the other thing that I like about terracotta is that when your days are hot and sunny, the terracotta is gonna allow for that breathability. So your roots will actually stay cooler in a terracotta, much cooler than they would in a plastic container that is getting, just warmed up really intensely from the sunlight. You can think of it like it's kind of like acts as like a protective shield from getting too hot in those summer months, whereas the sun will quickly penetrate the plastic, make it very hot, and the roots will get much hotter, much faster in a plastic container. So some of the plants that I prefer to grow or just have grown, like to grow in terracotta, snake plants is a classic. Here you can see I have my syngonium, some tradescantia. I have my Hoya growing in here. This is also another terracotta that doesn't have drainage, which is a little bit, it's just interesting when that happens. I don't know why that happens, but sometimes they don't have drainage. But so I like to use terracotta with plants that aren't too fussy about their watering needs, okay? Other plants that I like to grow in terracotta, I pretty much grow all of my philodendrons, not all of them, but a lot of different philodendrons in terracotta. My Florida ghost, my silver sword. We saw my alocasia earlier. It's great for fiddle leaf fig. The reason why I love the terracotta for fiddle leaf fig is it creates a really kind of even keel, balanced kind of balanced environment. So the plants, the terracotta is keeping it from experiencing too many extremes. All right, so that's so important, especially for our fiddle leaf fig. You can also grow monsteras. I have this gorgeous clivia growing in here. Plants that like to be root bound, growing in terracotta is a great choice. Look how root bound this is. Yeah, it could crack and break. The roots could crack and break the terracotta after a while, but until then, it's doing fantastically in this container. So you can find your terracottas, great selections at your local nurseries, also your big box stores, of course. That's generally where I will find mine. And then if you can find your terracotta with a matching sized saucer, I think the combination of the saucer and the container is fantastic with terracotta. We're gonna talk about saucers here in a little bit, but for now, that's just something to keep note of. Now, the next type of container would definitely be the plastic containers. These are probably the most prevalent. They're definitely the most lightweight, the cheapest. They're so cheap that most of you will probably never buy them. We do a lot of planting outside in the springtime, summertime, fall, and I will use nursery pots and grow things in nursery pots inside my home if I need something in a pinch. Like I didn't have anything that was the right size for this pink princess, so I decided to grow it in this black nursery pot. So I don't do a lot of displays in plastic containers. I don't really like the way that they look. But the thing about a plastic container is that they do not allow for evaporation out of the side of the container. So the only way that water is going to exit out of these containers is evaporation through the top or through drainage holes if there are drainage holes, which most of the time plastic pots, not most of the time, I would say half of the time plastic pots have drainage, other times they do not. Here you can see Miss Pink Princess does not have any drainage holes in this one. I like to use plastic containers for plants that like a lot of moisture. We were seeing my Anthurium Crystal Hope over here. This is a moisture-loving plant to the max. This is always moist. I have it growing in a plastic container with a plastic saucer underneath and water in there as well. So it's always kind of sitting in this moisture. If you have plants that are big moisture-loving plants, I recommend using plastic because when they're terracotta, like we were mentioning earlier, they're gonna dry out much faster because water is evaporating from more areas. With the plastic, it's more confined. Now, I always like to start my cuttings in plastic containers. Yes, there are like terracotta ones like this. I have this Pilea peperomioides growing in this. This is like a propagation pot, but I use it in my display. The reason I like to use plastic for my propagation, like I was mentioning earlier, warmth will penetrate the root systems more efficiently with plastic. So that's how we get propagation material to grow faster, is they need that warmth from the bottom, from the sides, wherever they can get it. So having a plastic container on a heat pad is the best way to get that sort of moisture, or get that sort of heat that they really need. And also because they're cheap and lightweight, that's what I like to use for propagation. That I'm gonna be having it here for 6 months and then I'll transfer it to a prettier pot. That's kind of my method. Okay, so for plants that really need to have that moisture locked in, Like I was saying, growing them in plastic is great, but if you want to have a better, more decorative look, like I was saying, I don't display a lot of plants in plastic, but I do, a number of them are hidden with plastic in other decorative pots. Here I have this fern. This is a new, they call it like a Boston tiger fern. Beautiful variegated foliage, look at that. So I have it growing in plastic because it's gonna lock in that moisture. And then I have it placed in this kind of like, this is like some really heavy duty kind of clay thing with my tray inside here. Rather than having here you can see, I actually use this like wooden thing to get the right height, and then any moisture that exits from the base of this will stay in that plastic tray. That way I don't have to put a plastic tray beneath here. It's actually gonna be staying all right in there, which I like. I like to keep a nice clean look in certain areas. So for plants like this, we call this like a slip cover. You just kind of slip it right in there and you don't see the plastic, but it has the right growing environment by being in the plastic. Also, when you're growing things in plastic and moving them into other containers like this, it provides a lot of variability so you can change the looks of your plants much, much easier. I'll show you another one that I did recently. Okay, so another thing that I really like about plastic containers is that the roots seem to penetrate really well throughout the container when they're grown in plastic, even better than when they're grown in terracotta. And that's a big plus in my book. So for a plant like this, this is a Rhaphidophora discursiva. I am growing it in a plastic container that I have slipped into this beautiful decorative pot. I know that if I were to grow it directly into this decorative pot, number one, as I transplanted it, I needed to transplant it into a larger container, but this decorative one would have been just one size too big. So I transferred it to this plastic one and then slipped it in. I actually cut the lip off of this plastic container just with scissors all the way around so that it would slide in easily and you wouldn't see like an overhang. And then I'm using this kind of sphagnum moss, oops, just made a mess, to kind of cover up the edge of that plastic because I don't want to see it. But what I'm getting at is that this is doing really well in this plastic container. If it was growing in this, it would probably have too much moisture locked in and it would probably stay cooler than it does in this plastic container. So growing them in plastic like this and then sliding it into a decorative pot is also, not only does it look better, but it is actually a very good cultural thing to do to help your plants grow their best. All right, so the next type of container I wanted to talk about is glazed ceramic ware. We remember the terracotta is unglazed and it has porous sides. Well, the glazed, of course, is glazed and it is not porous, which means no evaporation is going to come out of the sides of the container. For me, these have like the most finished look. They have like the most decorative kind of look. And when you pair the right plant with the right glazed container, you can really create a gorgeous piece of artwork with your plant. Here you can see this is an Anthurium vitarifolium growing in this kind of like rather low-key mustardy kind of container, and it really helps. It really allows for this plant's foliage to be like the star of the show. And because this is a super moisture-loving plant, I have it growing in a plastic saucer filled with water, so it always has a supply of water whenever it needs it. So our glazed ware is another way that they call it sometimes. Our glazed ware will come with or without drainage holes, it just depends. This one, of course, has drainage holes. Let's see, some that don't have drainage holes, like this one. This is a, I don't want to put it upside down, I don't want all the soil to fall out, but this is my Dracaena marginata, my cane plant, and this does not have drainage holes, growing in the glazed ware. So when you're growing plants in glazed ware without drainage holes, you have to have kind of like the best artistry. You have to really know the plant that you're growing and what it wants and what it needs. But you can do it. I have plenty like that. Let's see what else. Okay, over here, another plant I have growing in a glazed container. And what I like about the glazed containers, they have all sorts of different colors. You can really create a nice look of whatever you might be growing. This is a vanilla orchid, Vanilla planifolia, I think it is the Latin name. And I have this growing in a glazed pot, and I have it on top of a plastic saucer with pebbles so that any excess moisture will stay in that pebbles and create a more humid environment for this moisture-loving container, or for this moisture-loving plant. Another plant that I have grown in glazenware is this philodendron little Phil. It's getting pretty big by now, but just look at that combination. You really can't get this sort of striking energy, definitely not from plastic in my experience, or from terracotta, to get a real gorgeous energy. Using a glazed pot is awesome. And this is definitely like one of the hallmark plants in my collection for sure, mainly because I chose this container to go with this shiny foliage. So you can really get artistic with your containers when you're selecting it to go with the right plants. Okay, and here you can see I have this mini monstera growing in here. This is actually in a plastic container that I've slid into this container, which I found at like Marshall's or TJ Maxx. The glazed pots, although they do look the best, they're also the most expensive by far. So if you see one at a place like Marshall's or TJ Maxx or somewhere that has discounts, buy them. I promise you'll find a plant to fit into it later. You can also find some really nice ones. Oh, let me show you one that I have over here. You can also find some really nice ones at your local nurseries. A lot of local nurseries will be kind of promoting local artisans. So I bought this at a local nursery. It was a little expensive, but it's so beautiful. And you know, this is one of my favorite containers in my collection. And I have this variegated peace lily growing in here. This is also another moisture loving plant. So I have it grown in my plastic, has drainage holes, and any excess moisture will remain in the bottom of this glazed container that doesn't have drainage holes. So it creates a nice little perfect home for my variegated peace lily. So some other kind of containers that you can use and think about, I don't have any here, but a metal container. I'll do an overlay of some metal containers. My uncle has some like metal planters that he has growing in his townhouse. For me, they're a little bit rustic. I think metal containers are often a little bit for outside, but if it's part of your decor, they look pretty cool. You just gotta make sure that they're galvanized. Okay, so another type of container which is super classic and really old school would be like wooden containers. I've never actually grown things in a wooden container, but I'm planning on this summer using this chest and turning it into a big planter. If you are using a wood container though, you need to ensure that the wood is moisture resistant, or else it will of course get rotten and make holes and your planter will turn into mush over time. So I think this is going to be a nice summer project for me, turning this into a container, so stay tuned as we get to it. I actually do have this like random metal container that I actually like to use. It doesn't have any drainage holes, so I normally use this as a slip cover. The thing about metal, if you are using it, you don't want to let it be sitting in hot sun because of course the sun will heat it up and it could burn the roots. So I have this one. I guess this is also a metal container over here. I have this fern right here that I have growing in this metal container, slipped in a plastic, slipped into this metal, and I have my tray right in there so that any excess moisture will go right into here. I bought this thing and I thought that it would hold moisture in it, but it actually leaks, so that's why I put that little tray in there. So basically you can use anything that is moisture resistant, that has depth and width, that you can put soil in and roots can grow in. You can use pretty much anything to grow plants. I've seen bathtubs, I've seen sinks, I've seen wheelbarrows, I've seen all sorts of things be used as vessels for growing. Tires out in the yard. It's a great vessel to grow, tomatoes in. You can get creative, find stuff that's inexpensive. Everything is so expensive these days. So reusing things is one of the best ways. You create a unique energy wherever you might be growing with reused materials as you're growing vessels. So one last thing I wanted to talk about, I know Samantha's behind the camera looking at me, twiddling her thumbs with her eyes, I can see it. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to just touch on using trays. If your container has drainage holes, you need to put something underneath it or else you will create a mess. We all know that. So you can use plastic trays. I like using these ones. These are some of my favorite. These are plastic trays that look like terracotta. I like these ones probably the most because they have a nice look about them and they're nice and strong and sturdy. And if you have this on like a wooden table or something, it's not going to scratch it or leave marks. The nice thing about the plastic trays is that because they are non-porous, there will not be any humidity, any moisture that comes through the bottom. That cannot be this, I cannot say the same thing about our terracotta trays. Okay, so terracotta trays are also porous just like their brethren, the terracotta containers. As such, moisture will still seep through the bottom. So if you have this terracotta tray on a nice wooden piece of furniture, be careful because this can happen. Look, this was moisture from the bottom of this tray because I left it down here for too long without ever moving it. So terracotta trays can cause havoc on furniture if you let it. So if you want to be very proactive, preventative, use these little felt furniture pads and put them on the bottom of any trays, any terracotta trays that you might be putting on furniture. This is going to create just a big enough airspace so that there's no touching of the furniture and any moisture that seeps through the bottom of the tray will evaporate rather than leaving kind of this moldy spot, or do something like this, which keeps it protected just like that. Now, one thing that I also like to use as a tray would be like white ceramic plates, especially the glazed ones. Rather than using like a big plastic tray or a big terracotta tray, I'll use one of these and I think it looks nice. It has a really kind of low-key look about it and it goes well with glazed containers. So you can also use plates just like that. You can use like, if you have like a collection of small plants, you put it on a baking tray or a Pyrex, you can create a nice little look just like that. Get creative, use things lying around the house that maybe are in disuse or that haven't, or pieces of baking ware that you haven't used in a while. You can, create your own little energy. Anyways, those are some of my pros and cons that I find about different sorts of containers, saucers, terracotta, plastic, all sorts of things. I want you to create the most beautiful garden that exemplifies your spirit, your personality, and your energy. So knowing some of these different pros and cons maybe can help you make better informed choices about what you want to grow your plants in so that you can really show who you are. I hope the video was informative, a little bit fun, a little bit entertaining. It was kind of long. I apologize if it was too long and you got bored. But if not, thank you for sticking around all the way till the end. Leave a comment. I love reading your comments, your experiences, sharing your plant wisdom with me. That's how I grow and that's how we grow as a plant community. Thank you for joining me here on Plant Vibrations. As you know, we post longer form videos every Sunday and we try to do 1 or 2 short videos throughout the week. So I will catch you soon. Talk to you later. Ciao.